Yeah.
Okay, so we start recording right now. So, okay, so I remember that when I knew your name ever since I was young and read your book and so on, and I remember being very surprised when I heard that your wife is an Israeli, you did your postdoc here, and I was like, well, no, no way, man, this guy is too fucking famous to be anyhow related to us. So, how did this happen? How I would like to hear that story.
I think that's one of the joys of mathematics, that it has this universality, which means that we find ourselves quite easily making connections across the world with very different sort of people. So for me, it was really as I was doing my DPhil, as we call them in Oxford, rather than PhD. I kept on reading these papers by a mathematician that I just recognized, wow, this is my mathematical brother. This is somebody who just thinks the way I do, is interested in the same mathematical ideas that I am. And it was a fairly, I'd say, uh, it wasn't a very popular area at the time. So to find somebody who was interested in this thing called analytic pro-P groups, and had clearly read some of the seminal papers that were written in France about these objects, yet they weren't really mainstream within our area. So it was super exciting to just find somebody who was like, oh my gosh, this is long lost brother, called Alex Lobotsky. And so I was like, okay, I have to go and see this guy because, we are just so on the same wavelength. And, I looked at his academic address and said, oh, wow, he's at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. That's interesting. Never been to Israel before. And, I think similarly, he was starting to read material that I was writing and similarly recognize, oh, this is somebody who I would be able to collaborate with. So when I contacted him, uh, he was very open for me making some connection. But our very first meeting was not in Israel at all. It was, in fact, he said, "Look, I'm giving a week-long series of lectures in Norman, Oklahoma. You've got to come." And actually, weirdly, there was another mathematician in Norman, Oklahoma, whose work I'd been also working on. So it was kind of like, oh well, that's two birds with one stone. I'll go to Norman, Oklahoma. So that was actually the first time I'd ever been to the United States. So quite a weird place to start your America journey. This tiny town, Norman, in Oklahoma. But it's so I went round to his house, and I was so looking forward to talking about mathematics, and he said, I'm sorry, I can't talk maths. And I was like, what? I've come all this way. What do you mean you can't talk maths? He said, I will. We can talk maths when three stars appear in the night sky. And I was like, what's going on here?
Because of the
I was so,
Shabbat.
I come on Shabbat. And I, I mean, I'm not Jewish, and I had obviously friends in university who were Jewish, but I hadn't really had much interaction with this sort of culture. So I was mystified, and he said, "I can talk politics. That's fine. That's rest time activity." Anyway, we three stars appeared in the sky, and then we started talking maths, and we talked maths way into the middle of the night. I remember setting off back to the student digs I was in, and there was an amazing thunderstorm which hit one of the other student buildings, split it apart because Oklahoma is so flat that the lightning builds up so strongly. So I just gone into to my digs, and this other building got kind of blown up practically. So it was kind of my first interaction with Alex was quite apocryphal. uh, but then he said, you've got to come over and spend a bit of time in Israel. And I originally decided to go for a month and just spend a bit of time there. And as the time for me to head out came closer, then the first Iraq War, I think, broke out. And so Alex phoned me and said, "Look, frankly, we're not thinking much about mathematics. We're down in the bunkers with our gas masks on. Don't come." And actually, I think that was really fortuitous, because when I did go, I went for a year to the Institute for Advanced Study up at Givatram. They were doing a program in field arithmetic, which is very much about pro-P groups and pro-finite groups. A little bit out my area, but it was so I was visiting as part of the Institute for Advanced Study, and coming to the idea of what's coming to Israel like for the first time. It was a really tough first month because it's a completely different sort of culture. It's very in your face. It was aggressive. It was I wasn't Jewish. I was really kind of struggling to find my place there. And I think if I'd just come for a month on that original visit that got cancelled because of the war, I think I probably wouldn't have come back. But a month was enough to get used to the different style, which is actually, there's, it's a two-edged sword. There's something very nice about, the immediacy of Israeli culture, which I really fell in love with. That people just don't, don't spend ages sort of on silly things. They get right down to how much do you earn? What's your love life like? Uh, so actually, I think it was good that I committed to a year, and it was a life-changing year in many ways. So this was 1991. I came till till 1992. That first year.
Hmm. You know, it's funny. I think about some things. First of all, I just about the wars. There is always a war going on because just now that you were talking, you just had
Yes.
another one. So it seems like
Yes, but I think what's interesting is I think uh, when you're looking from the outside, you think the thing is just on fire. But of course, as soon as you go to the place, you realize, well, because there were a lot of suicide bombers on buses when I was there, so that was unsettling. But the point is that when you're there, the violence is happening somewhere else, and even if you go there, the violence is happening in the other street, and if you go there, the violence is happening in the other house. So life goes on despite the terror, and I've witnessed that in Belfast. If you're in Northern Ireland, you think during the Troubles that it's a no-go area, but actually the truth is that even in a state of war, people live their lives.
absolutely. So that time when you came to Israel and lived there for a year, was that the first time in your life where you lived abroad in some other country?
I think for that significant amount of time, and I mean, I travelled quite a lot. So I'd been to Russia the summer before to mathematical conferences. So I mean, I travelled quite a lot, but I think that was the first year where I kind of felt like I'd moved somewhere. Other times it was traveling. So I traveled a lot, but so it was quite significant. I was living there. I think that is the first time I'd lived somewhere abroad.
And how old were you at the time?
Okay, you need me to do some maths now. uh, um, so it was 1991. I was born in 64. So was I 25 then, or 26?
25.
Must have been 26. That seems quite. Um, Uh, yeah, because I finished. Oh, yeah, that's right. So I finished my doctorate at 24. I had a postdoc in London, then I had a year of postdoc in Oxford, back in Oxford. So yeah, that makes sense. I was 26.
26. And don't worry if you make an error in the arithmetic. You know that time when Grudevnik thought that 57 is a
51 is a
prime.
prime number.
Okay, so you said that you immediately felt something like different about the Israeli culture, and I always hear that, like as an Israeli, I always hear people saying like, "You people are very blunt," but
Yeah.
I'm trying to like put myself in the shoes of someone who grew in another culture and really understand how is it. I mean, I feel like I need some like concrete examples that punch you in the face, like.
Yes. Well, yeah, that's. I Yeah, I'm trying to think. I can't think of any kind of like it's a sort of I mean, a very simple one is the idea of queuing. So, we are in England, we love queuing. We love standing behind a line, and getting on a bus. It was just like free for all, survival of the fittest. I think it was small things like that, but also just interactions. People would ask you quite blunt questions about uh, your financial situation or your kind of relationship, which just got you quickly to interacting on quite a deep level. So although it's quite blunt, I think, especially coming from England, where we tiptoe around social kind of situations, I think I actually really enjoyed that sort of sense of yeah, let's get directly to what's important in life, how much you
Yeah,
earn, and what your love life is like.
yeah, there's something in me that feels like you're naturally like that. I mean, I saw a video of yours in the Israeli Institute of Advanced Study, and the thing is, you wore that like hat that is so like freestyle and stuff. That that, that
Okay, right, gosh, yeah. I mean, I think it was absolutely right for me. And the weird thing was, you see, I'd come from a year um, being a fellow in an Oxford college, which was like living something out of a 1920s P.G. Wodehouse novel. We had butlers, we had dinner with gowns on. It was very kind of formal, and it had a charm of its own. And I think part of me wanted to just run away from that for a year. So I grew my hair long. I enjoyed just being in this kind of very different culture. I had friend on a kibbutz that I used to go and work with, and I really immersed myself in the culture. So that was what I mean. Alex used to say, Marcus, I think you know Israel better than most Israelis, because I'd spend every weekend just traveling, because the country is absolutely stunning and so varied. You can go down to the desert, you can go up to the Galilee and just have alpine experience. I traveled a lot to the West Bank, within sort of the Arab community as well. So for me, it was very important to be part of that culture. And I think that as well, I was part of the Institute for Advanced Study, which meant there were other visitors from abroad who came, and I made very good friends with them. So there was a little bit of camaraderie of people from the abroad, mathematicians. So we often would travel together. But I also, for example, I was really keen to get in with the student community. So I do a lot of theatre, and so I know that theatre is a very good way to get to know people, because there's a lot of trust involved. So that very first semester when I came, I found a play that was being staged up at Mount Scopus, and I went and auditioned and got a part. And it was interesting because that was actually perhaps not Israeli culture, because it was an English production, so it was a lot of American Jews who were visiting students for the year. But for me, that was still interesting, because I was not ever immersed in Jewish culture like I was when I came to Israel, and that for me was very important to understand the culture. And so I was the only non-Jew in this play of The Diary of Anne Frank, which was quite funny. But I got to know them really well, and I had a very good friend who came out of that experience. So for me, it was that trip to Israel was very much just immersing myself in the mathematics, but also a really vibrant and exciting country.
awesome. It's funny. You're giving me ideas as a Givat Ram student and how to make new friends in the Harrods of Fame right now.
Yeah.
So, did you live in Givat Ram at the time?
No, so I actually, the first 4 months, I lived in Aner Shalev's flat. Aner is a mathematician in Hebrew University, and he was visiting Oxford, and he said, "Look, I won't come back until January. So that was really nice. I had a very nice home, and I shared it with a German mathematician who was part of the Institute for Advanced Study. So we were there together. But it's interesting because when he came back, I then had to find somewhere else to live. Um, and I wanted to live with other people, so uh, I started applying. It's very organized. There's a whole list you can sign up for, and you go and around to the flat, and I had some interesting experience because not being Jewish, a lot of people didn't want to share with me. So there was a kind of inverted uh, anti-Semitism, and I recognize that quite a lot of people were like, no, I want people of my culture. I don't. So I actually found it really difficult to find a flat, and eventually I just decided, okay, I'm just going to go traveling for a bit. So I decided to. It was a semester break, I think. So I decided to go down to Egypt, and I traveled around Egypt. And I told Alex, oh, I'm going to go for like a week down to Sinai or something like that. And then I met some people in Sinai, and a few people on the theatre trip came with me. And we decided, oh, we'll take some camels across the desert. And we went to Cairo. And then we went down to Aswan and Luxor. And I had an amazing time. And I was traveling for about a month or something. And then I got back. I thought I better probably go back, do some mathematics in Hebrew. And when I got back, Alex said, "Where have you been? You know, I've been so worried about you." I was like, you said you were going to go for a week, and you were, and
It was
he
before
said,
like smartphones and
"Yeah, I'm
cell
afraid
phones
I'm
and
that
stuff.
old." But the funniest thing was, I said, what was I going to tell your parents? I said, my parents don't even know that I went to Egypt. And it was an interesting because there was a little cultural revelation there because, you know, and this is one of the things which was very important about that trip to Israel is the importance of family. And I think, we will get on to the fact that I met my wife there, but I think that was, the importance of family within Jewish culture is something that, I perhaps missed in my own upbringing. So, the fact that Alex was worrying about me was my parents really didn't have a clue where I was a kind of little revelation about the difference in cultures. Anyway, I then came back and I started flat hunting again. I went to a flat. This woman opened the door and she said, "Do you know what a palindrome is?" I said, "Yeah, that's really interesting because that's actually related to my mathematical research. It's a thing which goes the same backwards and forwards. It's got that symmetry to it." She said, "Good. The last flatmate didn't even know what a palindrome is. You got the room." And it's like, so I had second revelation. If you're not Jewish, the second best thing is to be an intellectual. Um, so I got this room, and then there was another room in the flat, and basically this woman really needed the rent paid because it was like past the rent day, and so we had these people visiting. They were all mad, and it was like we can't take. Eventually, we had to take one of them, so we took this mad woman who is now my wife. Um, and
Nice one.
the first thing she said to me, I was cooking some aubergines on the fire, and she said, "Oh, I bet I can cook aubergines better than you can." That was the first thing she said to me. Um, anyway, so she became my flatmate, and I broke my cardinal rule: never sleep with flatmates. And I've ended up sleeping with her for the rest of my life. So
Yeah, breaking rules sometimes.
yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's good, even in mathematics.
Yeah, I remember you telling some story about how she was taking you for a date in Brit Mila of
Yes. Oh yes, I think I wrote about that in a book because it was so funny. I think our third date or something, where we went down to see a friend of ours whose baby had just been born, and yeah, to see a Brit Milah, and I was fairly shocked. But we had this funny conversation on the bus up to Jerusalem, back up to Jerusalem. He said, "Well, if we carry on going out and we have a son, that's what's going to happen to our son." And I was like, "Wow, that's barbaric." But sure enough, yeah, my Tom Air is also had a Brit Mila.
that's funny. You have a son named Tomer too. So Shani, what was she doing at the time when you met her? Like, tell me a little bit about her then.
Yeah, yeah. So she was studying at Bezalel. So she was doing graphic design at the art college. So yeah, which was, I think as you probably picked up, I mean, the world of art is an important part of my world. I mean, not so much visual art, which is what Shani does, but certainly music and a theatre, and so there was a sort of uh, a connection there. Um, she did a very interesting project, which she called My Goy Friend, and she basically, because we started traveling a lot, but she made these portraits of me as kind of like Christ-like figures, and they were kind of like those Greek Orthodox icons. We still have one in upstairs in her room, but it was kind of me. I had to dress up and sort of pretend to be and then she would cover the whole thing with gold, and so that was her boyfriend project. But yeah, that was quite funny. And she actually she was born in a kibbutz up in Yagur near Haifa. So we would go up there because she had grandparents there. So that was very much became an important part of our kind of getting to know the kibbutz. But we basically lived in Jerusalem, and that's where our beginning of our life was.
Yeah, I'm very glad. I mean, it must have. It seems to me, I just imagine like going to another country and meeting a girl there, and falling in love. And I guess there must be something scary about it because, you know, yeah, y- you one of you will probably need to move to another country, and so I think it's nice you two had the courage to do that, and it worked so well
Yeah,
for
yeah.
both
I
of you.
mean, yeah, it's there are a lot of unknowns, and I suppose sometimes mathematicians, we like to deal in certainties. We like proof. We like to know how things are going to work out. But on the other hand, we do spend a lot of time working on things that we don't know what the answer is. So and you just find a way to make things work. Or so yeah. I mean, it was when you start going out with somebody, you haven't got any massive plans. But as things, I left after that first year, and I started learning Hebrew when I got home. As a that was an important, because I thought I was just going to be there for a year. So why would I need to learn Hebrew? But that for me was a way of building the connection. Shani would come to Oxford quite when she had breaks. Whenever I had a break from university, I would go and spend, we have quite big vacations in Oxford, so I could go for 6 weeks. Or so we went back and forward, and we had flats in Nachlaot, in Nachli, in Jerusalem. We had quite a few series of flats, which was quite fun around Jerusalem. So we kept the relationship going, and then eventually I applied for a 6-month visiting professorship, which was in 1994, and so I came, and it was then that we said, okay, yeah, we because then there then comes a moment. I think when you're going out with somebody in long distance, there comes a moment of after about 2 years when you're like, okay, this is fun, but either we're going to stop now, or is this serious? And so that moment came, and we said, no, I think this is serious. And so we made a commitment to each other, and we got married whilst I was there on that trip. But of course, because we don't share a religion, and obviously marriage is um, controlled by the religious in Israel. There's no secular marriage, even if you're a Jew and you don't want to have a mikvah, you hop over to
Yeah,
Cyprus. So
unfortunately.
yeah, so we got married in Cyprus. We had a big party, and we wrote our own ceremony, which is a kind of mix of my culture and Shani's culture. And we had a kind of secular rabbi, a friend of ours who's a TV presenter. And then when we came back to Oxford, we then did a wedding in Oxford to mark our marriage for my community here. So yeah, so that was sort of the kind of big Israeli. But for me as well, mathematically, it was extremely. Um, important period. I mean, we made this breakthrough, Alex and me, and we published a paper together in American Journal of Mathematics, and it was a sort of something I'm still working on. Was the breakthrough there? It was actually an understanding of some symmetry that exists. It's called it's a functional equation basically, but it is basically a palindromic symmetry, which is what that woman who gave me the room uh, wanted to know. So it's kind of weird that.
She
So
knew what she was asking.
yeah, she didn't realize quite how important it was to me. But and I'm still working on that material that Alex and I first worked on, and so it's still very much part of my kind of mathematical life. What we opened up during that period when I was visiting
Okay, so I think I'll ask two little more questions about the subjects because, as expected, I'm probably not good with times, but that's good that way. I think it's better to have like three conversations. So I would like to hear a little bit about your experience in the Hebrew University background, all this place, the
Yeah,
Einstein Institute. Like how is is that real? And second, you said that. About the Jewish family. You know, that's something that surprised me because I always knew that Americans, for instance, because the United States is so big, so the kid goes to another country and they're not entitled. But I thought that everyone else, like the British or normal-sized countries, it's like in Israel, and you're saying that it's not. And
no, it really isn't. I mean, first of all, the my experiences at the Hebrew University um, were fantastic. I mean, it is really the this kind of center for what I do. So it was just there were so many people, not just Alex, whose work I'd read, Avinon Man, Aner Shalef, and many beyond that, and it's just it's a really vibrant mathematical community. So it was really exciting to be there. And the other thing is interesting. People used to joke when I went to America subsequently that, oh, you've married an Israeli. Oh, right. You see, in America, you're either Jewish or you're Chinese as a mathematician. And so they were saying, you've married in order to join the club. Um, but this actually means that you've got a lot of, really high powered mathematicians, Jewish mathematicians who will make the effort to come to Israel in a supportive way. So I remember Kajdan, who then eventually became a professor there, but he was just visiting at that time. So that there were a lot of mathematicians who came through the Hebrew University, big names that were not coming through Oxford. Oxford was, maybe it was about my particular area of research. I don't know, but I did feel like this was not somewhere on the edge and marginal, which I think, I made friends with some people in mathematical physics, and for them it was on the edge and marginal. But for me, I was like seeing, group theorists, algebraic geometers, number theorists that I've never seen come through Oxford. So it really was like coming to a major center of mathematics for me. So, and also just the support staff as well. There was one woman who interestingly, when I arrived, I had a bag with a year's worth of research in, and this bag got lost on the plane. And I arrived just with all of these notes I was going to start working on. It was quite cathartic in a way. It was like burning. It was like some sort of Buddhist practice where you destroy the mandala and start again. But eventually, this woman in the department, she managed to trace down this bag, and I got it back. But by then, I'd sort of moved on. But she was quite important because I got to know her very well, and uh, we used to play Prince of Persia together when a day of
the
mathematics
computer
finished.
game,
The computer game, yeah, this wonderful little white. So that was quite helpful in that first month, just getting to know her. We'd play this game together, and it was just like a little bit of downtime. It's yeah. So and about family, you see, in a way, I was also building up not just eventually my personal family, but my mathematical family as well. These people, one of the lovely things about being a mathematician is, your community of people who are interested in what you do will be there always, and they will always be interested in, like a son. I mean, I talk about my PhD students like my children, and to see them grow and develop and take my ideas on further, it's just that is part of the joy of that, of the mathematical community, and it is small enough. So you're going to conferences, meeting the same people. I remember one person describing it, mathematicians were like a nomadic tribe. We go off and we explore the mathematical world, and then we gather together the tribe sort of once a year. Maybe it'll be in Israel, maybe in Moscow, maybe in Manchester, and we'll share our stories. And there's something really lovely about that continuity, of the people that the people I've spent my life with, people who've died, who've been part of that whole journey. So I think it wasn't just, I was building up my mathematical family as much as, understanding that Jewish culture is I think, much more family orientated than, and I think, that's why, I didn't convert. We got married, but we, here in England, we have, we really do make Judaism part of the culture of our family. I have my own cultural shticks. I make sure that all my children are Arsenal supporters. That's my religion. That's what's important. But I love the fact that we do Friday night dinner together. We invite lots of friends around. It's a lovely way to mark the end of the week. And so we certainly kind of incorporate the cultural side of the, I learned about. The funny thing was, you see, Alex, I mean, I think this illustrates also how amazing mathematics is at building bridges between, very different people. So Alex is
Because
the
you
West
and Alex are so different. Is like
he's a
religious,
West Bank settler.
settler.
Exactly. I mean, I came from a very left-wing tradition in Oxford, very pro-Palestinian, and here I am going to go and work with a West Bank settler. But but then you arrive and you find, no, these are human beings. They're people who, Alex cares. He cares about the land, but he also cares about the people there, and it helped to as well. And this is very important in this particular period because obviously there's a lot of it, justifiably at the moment, anti-Israeli feeling. But what I what's still difficult is a lot of these people have no knowledge, and that's the thing that I was quite really appreciated, that I began to understand the background of this whole thing in a deep way. That meant that my political position is so much more nuanced now because of having lived in Israel, lived with Israelis, suffered with Israelis. Uh, that it's it's difficult seeing people so, um, uh, who I sometimes I think, um, it's the kind of knee-jerk, anti-Israeli. I think there are reasons to be critical, obviously, of Israel at the moment, but there's a lot of ignorance fueling the political debate, which isn't helpful.
Absolutely. But it's interesting because I actually kind of relate to your experience in actually even with regard to people like Alex, because for myself, I'm Jewish, but I'm atheist. I'm a very militant atheist, for instance.
Yep.
That in the whole cultural war going on in Israel right now, there is a real feeling in the secular part of Israel that the state is becoming more religious and might not
Yeah.
be what we hope our children will grow in anymore.
Yeah.
And there is this weird relationship I feel with uh, religious Israelis. Because on the one hand, we have so much in common. We can be students at university and eat together and be friends and do mathematics together and be really like that. And on the other hand, there's differences and even the sense of like danger from the other group or something like that. And the annoying thing is that life has both of things. I mean, I can't just hate them or just
No.
Love that. So
Yeah.
how do you deal with such tension? I mean, how do you? Isn't it difficult sometimes?
Yeah, it is. And I think, part of it is finding common ground because we're all humans. And so there will be commonalities. And the other one is listening. We're very bad at listening to the other and kind of putting oneself in the shoes of the other. And, that's a skill that needs to be learned. But, it's kind of interesting because Alex uh, realized after a while that I was dating an Israeli, and I think he felt, oh my gosh, I, I made a huge mistake. I've invited this guy over, and he's going to steal one of our Israeli women. um, I mean, I don't think it, but it was, but we spent quite a lot of time with him talking about Judaism and the importance of Judaism to him, which I found absolutely fascinating. It was really great to learn, about the holidays in detail. We would hit Purim, and he would explain Purim to me. Pesach. It was very interesting. I started dating Shani around the time around Pesach time, and she invited me to her family to do the Seder. But I'd already been invited by the other flatmate in our house to a Seder in Jerusalem. So I didn't know what a Seder was. So Alex would explain all the kind of things that would go on, and but it was quite this Seder that I went to in Jerusalem, it was in three languages. It was in English, Hebrew, and Russian, and they did everything in all three. We didn't even eat till after midnight, and I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah,
But I love the kind of performance side of the
those
ritual
Jews
side.
surely loves to suffer.
Yeah. But yeah, so Alex was very interesting that we would spend quite a lot of time talking about Jewish culture, and I kind of enjoyed and appreciated that as well.
Interesting. So, wait, let me just see about the question. I think I'll focus on Israel more because we probably don't have time to do like a deep conversation about other things. So, if that's okay with you, I think.
Yeah, that's good. I'm happy. I think there was one thing that because you sent some a few ideas for the topics that we would talk about. Um, I think there was one thing that was, I think, especially for younger mathematicians, that I did learn in Israel from one of the mathematicians in the department because I did my PhD and I did a really great result, got published in the Annals of Mathematics. It was a really nice calling card for my arrival as a mathematician. And then, I come to Israel and I really felt I couldn't live up to that, that big discovery. And I felt a lot of eyes on me as a postdoc. Oh, what's he going to do next? What a great result. And I found that quite uh, oppressive in a way, and the expectations, and I couldn't meet them, and things weren't going well. And I'd been working for a year on this kind of project looking at a kind of model theory of groups, and it wasn't going anywhere. And then Avignon Man, mathematician, one of the mathematicians that I read a lot of his work and respected a lot, he said, look, you're going to have to learn the cycle of mathematical life, which is you have these moments of great discovery, and then you have these years, maybe you're in a trough where nothing happens. And of course, when you first see that, you think, oh, this is the curve of a mathematical life. It goes up and then it down, and then I'm finished. This is what you need to do is you need one observation that then goes up again and it hits another peak. It may not be as high as the one you just did, but it's this kind of real oscillation between highs and lows. And as a mathematician, that's one of the things you're going to have to navigate is how do you deal with those low moments, and a lot of it is about recognizing the pattern. Okay, yeah, but if I keep going, then I will have that next oscillation up into something again, which renews your love of mathematical research and things. So I think that was an important thing that I learned from senior mathematician in the department, that helped me psychologically overcome a period when I felt like, oh, nothing's happening.
We all have that's true. We all have periods of like the things go better or worse, and oftentimes, the periods that I guess that periods that seems like nothing goes on is like a building period for when that
Yeah.
suddenly gets like. But in the end, not everyone will be as good, and sometimes, yeah, there will be others that have better results, or you might be unsure about your field with it. I would very much like to have a mathematical world where everyone is doing it for, in Hebrew we say l'shem shamayim, for for the sake of the thing itself. Like,
Yeah.
but but we still live in a society when even as a mathematician, you're judged by your society, by yourself, by your results, by how you
And
are
I
in
would
your
say,
run.
I would say especially mathematics and maybe especially academia because it is hugely competitive. It's uh, there's a lot of falling by the wayside. There aren't enough professorships for all of the postdocs, and there aren't enough postdocs for all the PhDs. So it is, and it is very competitive, even on a sort of level of trying to prove a theorem. You people feel very nervous about sharing ideas for fear that somebody will just suddenly run away with the idea and prove it before you. I mean, look at Andrew Wiles. He didn't tell anybody that he was working on Fermat's last theorem because he wanted his name on that. We get very few rewards. It's not a very lucrative job being a mathematician, and the things that really matter are just being recognized for having made a breakthrough on a theorem. So they are. So I think that that is one of the perhaps downsides, that very competitive nature of mathematics. And I tried to instill within my research group in Oxford a sort of more collaborative feel. But bottom line is they're still competing for the very few postdocs fellowships that are out there. So it's inevitably built into the system that they feel themselves up against somebody else. And I think I spent a period of time in Cambridge, and I moved my students back to Oxford. And Oxford is a little bit more relaxed in its approach. It was more collaborative. Whereas Cambridge was very competitive, and I think a lot of my PhDs were like they much more enjoyed the chance to share ideas rather than to hide them and compete. So I think that is something that we have to kind of navigate and deal with. And it's I mean I working with somebody else is wonderful. Working with Alex and being able to, he was such a generous person. He was, senior to me, so there wasn't a feeling of competition between us. He's very generous with his ideas, and that was really lovely to work with somebody. Very often you feel like you've got a ladder individually and there are rungs missing and you just can't get to the top. And then you find somebody who has another ladder, and if you put them two together, you both go to the top. So Alex is very important to me. There was another very important collaborator in Germany that again felt like my brother. I mean, he was also a little bit senior to me, Fritz Grunewald. And I spent another of the great breakthroughs that I made sort of after Alex was working with him. Just and he unfortunately died. He had a heart attack whilst driving his BMW at high speed. Fortunately, his wife was next to him, but he died very tragically. And that was, this goes back to that feeling of like your fellow mathematicians being really part of your family, and that hurts so much to have that person who so understood and we cared about the things that I cared about suddenly not there was really devastating. So I think the of course there's this kind of individual side of being a mathematician, but I think those moments of friendship and collaboration really make being a mathematician so for me so special.
So, what do you feel is stronger here? I mean, because you have this feeling of like a tribe, you said like a nomadic tribe, but you must have, I guess you must have felt sometimes like there is something threatening about others or something threatening about, like, did you have for instance, ever had a feeling that if in the end of thing, in the end you want wouldn't be as special, as unique, as important mathematically or historically, it nothing was worth it. You were something.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, to sort of uh, I realize at some point that uh, there are. I'm not going to win a Fields Medal, for example. I knew that my mathematics was not at that level, but I had enough self-belief that no, I think my mathematics is interesting enough and worthwhile enough, and that I'm good enough to be part of this community. And so I think you're right. There'll always be people who are like the superstars who just make extraordinary new breakthroughs, and that's really exciting to see that happen. And I think that's one of the other exciting things of being around a mathematician is just seeing it change and evolving. It is a really dynamic. There are things which we didn't know 10 years ago, which we know now. And that's what's exciting about having students because they can push that on. So
Yeah,
yeah,
so
I think
your student list, how that you did something about zeta functions, like in the group theoretic student, and just doing it like one about rings, one about like it's
things like
spreading
that.
all
But
over the
also, there was uh, one of the uh, I talk about in my symmetry book the moment that one of my students and I understood that even when our zeta functions have interesting algebraic geometry to them, they still have this palindromic symmetry. But we need to just introduce the functional equation of the algebraic geometry, the variety that we're looking at. So we had this example where I'd embedded an elliptic curve um, into this group, and I remember, we saw something weird happening, and then I went and got a book about algebraic geometry and realized, oh my gosh, no, the functional equation of the elliptic curve is making a whole thing click together. And that interestingly happened on 9/11. So after we made that discovery, Shani phoned me up from work and she said, you've got to switch on the television because there's you know, something's happening in America. So we had this amazing revelation together, which was then part of his PhD. And he's gone on to really explore that. And it was a very significant moment. But, the lovely thing is, I'm still working on a problem with another Korean student of mine who's now a professor in Korea. And we work every week sort of on this problem. And it's a problem that I learned about right back when I was a PhD, and we still don't know the answer to it. It's so our zeta functions seem to have a kind of uniformity across primes. So if you change the prime, the shape of these things are sort of um, in particular groups, free nilpotent groups. They seem to just not vary much across primes. But my discovery that I made with this German mathematician when I was working with him was that we can get interesting varieties like elliptic curves, but there's still a question about whether these free objects, whether they have these algebraic sort of more exotic algebraic geometry. So that's something I'm working on still, which goes back to a question. So that's what drives me. I really want to know the answer because it's really not clear. I think now that if we make the group large enough, we'll see things which will contradict what was conjectured so decades ago in the 80s when I was doing my PhD. But so that sense of the continuity and the desire to know the unknowns, those still drive me as a mathematician. I mean, obviously, I do a lot more than just mathematics, and for me, that was an important kind of change in my life when I did a lot of research up to pumping out papers in publications of IHES, annals. Um, uh, but then I did make this decision to kind of broaden what I do, and then I wrote that first book, The Music of the Primes. I made TV programs. I do theatre. I've written several plays. I just took a play on tour in India about one of my mathematical heroes, Andre Weil, that I wrote. So for me, I think that I know that maybe that's something that makes me slightly different from other mathematicians. I needed to have a kind of broader perspective on life than just mathematics, and that all of those other things help provide that for me. But that said, they do take away time from that I can spend just immersing myself in the world of mathematics. But sometimes I think you need that. When I was a PhD, coming back to, perhaps some of your audience and your community, you can't do mathematics all the time. And in fact, if you try to, it can sometimes just, you can get really stuck. And so for me, for example, theatre, I mean, I did it when I came to the Hebrew University, but I was doing it before. I worked with a community theatre in Oxford. And when my maths was going badly, I would go down to the theatre to spend time acting, playing in the theatre with people I got to know there. And so for me, my mathematics benefited from finding places that I could go to which weren't about doing mathematics. Because when I came back to the maths, my perspective would have changed, and I may have a new perspective just from the time I've spent away. So I think that's really important, not to have things which are complementary to your mathematics, which are really actually will help you mathematically.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think that the brain also does. You know, this famous story about Poincaré that the brain did that
Exactly.
walked in the street, and yeah. So I actually relate. And in the end, the way I think of it, I mean, mathematics is very important to me in my life. I want to be a mathematician, of course, but at the end, it's also ask myself what are the most basic things in life. I mean, what are we? We are some kind of fucking mammal that evolves on this earth, and we feel things like love, curiosity, and so on. And all those social rules, like mathematicians, in the end, they're like cultural memes. They're not something like in nature. So I think, I'm always asking myself, am I like mixing the things that are important in life right? I mean, what should what should I emphasize in life? What should I do with my time? Would doing mathematics? Oh, if maybe I'll ask you this last question because I see that you are all the time. I mean, when you look at the human life from like an outer perspective, and you ask yourself what is it should be important in human life, what in your opinion are those things, and why did you choose the life path that you did, and
Yeah, yeah.
including being a
Uh,
mathematician?
yeah, no, I think you see, we're all searching for meaning, and we're both atheists, and so we don't get our meaning from a kind of artificial religious stories. But I
Yes,
still
sir.
think our species is one that sort of is looking for meaning, and for me, I think that's where mathematics helped me, because I think you talked about all of those things where our species is very particular to our this particular planet, and there's one of the things about mathematics which is a real joy is that feeling of accessing universal truth, and that gives you a huge amount of meaning, and because this thing. I mean, one of the books that was very important to me when I was uh, deciding what I wanted to do was A Mathematician's Apology by G.H. Hardy, and he talks about the power of proof in mathematics to give you a little bit of immortality. I mean, I think the things which give us meaning are the things about continuity, like our children, that feeling like I'm part. I may die, but I will pass something of me on to my children, and that will live on. And I think your mathematical children, your PhDs, play a little bit of that. But there's a feeling of leaving behind a mathematical discovery. I mean, I discovered these groups which have elliptic curves embedded in them. It completely changed our subject. That for me gives me some sort of meaning, because you know I do believe that the reason that we see so much mathematics when we scientifically explore our universe is that I think that mathematics is something which exists out of time. It's timeless. It's about structures that don't need a moment of creation. So often we're looking for an explanation of where did all of this come from, and some people will talk about Genesis, and but for me, mathematics provides that. Mathematics, I feel, is the structures which we are a physicalized piece of mathematics, and our job as mathematicians is revealing those truths that are universal, timeless, and which are actually an explanation for why and how we are here. So I think that's why I think being a mathematician, as opposed to anything else, um, is so special.
I absolutely relate. It's like a religious experience, like being like touching something transcendent and
Yeah,
like whenever I lose like I have a hard day doing mathematics or something like that, I just or think about the fact that I don't know AI might replace all of us or something. I just think about think about some mathematical truth that I discovered, perhaps something small. I didn't discover something important yet, but and I'm like, there's something that nothing else in the world is like that, man. It's like that, like
yeah,
being in direct connection with Mother Nature in some very intimate way. So yeah,
yeah.
I absolutely. Okay, so thank you very much, Marcus. I really appreciate that. I
Well,
really
it
have.
was good to talk about my time in Israel, very important moment in my life. So, yeah, and also, I think it's really, uh, I was helped very much by the professors that were brought me on in the mathematical community from PhD to postdoc to where I am today. So, if I can do that for anyone else, that's worth it.
Absolutely, that's really meaningful for me. So thank you very much, and have a very nice day.
And you too. Great.
Okay, so see ya. See
Great. All right. Yeah. Let me know when it's gone live, and I will be interested to see and tweet it out as well. Or not that I do Twitter anymore, but
ya. Absolutely. So I'll upload it to the YouTube channel of my
yeah,
blog and
brilliant.
also my domain. Absolutely.
Great. All
Okay.
right. Have a good day, Tommy. All right. See you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye. Midroad.